Good. Now we're good. So brought to you by Abilitie and Springboard. Welcome, one and all. We have the honor of speaking to Luke, who's the VP of Product at Abilitie. Uh, Luke, why don't you quickly just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can kind of get started with the theme of the talk.
Awesome. Awesome. Roger, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Awesome. Awesome. I know we had the echo earlier. First off, thanks for everyone for waiting. I know we're a couple minutes late, but appreciate it. I'm Luke here. I'm the VP of Product at a company called Abilitie. We do leadership programs with gamified simulations to teach people the core skills of leadership. We also run a program called the Invited MBA, which is our 12-week part-time MBA program for people who are looking to get business skills. So people who are looking to understand business acumen, understand management, and understand strategic leadership. And so I have the privilege of overseeing our product team, which means I oversee our product portfolio, our program portfolio, our program direction. I oversee our pedagogy and our methodology, including the work we do with Gather in the metaverse. And I also get to oversee our tech team. So I oversee our 3 engineers who are on our tech team, who actually do the work to build out all of our simulations and all of our products. So I'm happy to be here with you, Roger, and super excited by the work you're doing at Springboard and the work all your alumni are doing as they get into technical jobs.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this is going to be a great talk for all the Springboard alums, all the Springboard students out there, everybody who's kind of looking at how do I take the next step in my career. I think Luke's going to be able to share a lot of wisdom on that topic. So, yeah, I guess starting off, I took a look at your LinkedIn, and you said something I thought was really interesting. You said that you developed into a Mosaic career. That's kind of like what you were looking to build, right? And doing a little bit of research. You've been in the Sports Center top 10. You've done a Harvard degree. You have, now you're a VP product at the startup. Walk us through, what is it like? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Luke, beyond just what you do now. Was it true you were, what was the highlight? How is your
Sure.
career lead in this way?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, we can go many different directions with this, Roger. That's really funny to think about. First off, if you happen to be watching Sports Center in about 2004 and you saw the number 6 play, it must have been a November or a December day, and you looked really closely at the Oklahoma Princeton game, you would have seen a guy by the name of Jabari Brown grab the ball at the elbow in the basketball game, grab the ball at the elbow, rip through, and go in and do a thunderous dunk under which there was a guy sitting like this. And that guy like this, Roger, was me. And so it was quite an experience for me to be watching TV that night and see myself under the rim protecting myself as Jabari Brown dunked it. So it might sound sexy to be on Sports Center, but it certainly isn't always. But I appreciate you asking about the career and where it goes. I say this Mosaic career in so much as there's a lot of different pieces that have led to my career. I started out as a consultant. I worked at the big firm McKinsey to start my career. I then went back and got my MBA from Harvard. While I was there, I started teaching. I took that teaching job and joined the startup world and started running operations for a company that did business boot camps for people starting their first job. And I did that for a number of years before leaving and then running a people department somewhere else. Right. And so that all led me to then come back to the consulting world and take over and help build out our McKinsey Academy for a couple of years and help build out what learning and development looked like for a big consulting firm and for their clients. And so I focused on that for a while. And then I came and joined Abilitie, who I'd known for many years. And I know my colleagues. I've worked with them as an independent contractor since about 2015. But last year I made the jump and joined full time as the head of product. And so each step kind of looks a bit disparate, and each step has its own little colors and flavor and texture to it. But then together, to me, they add up to kind of this picture of how I manage my own career. And that's, again, coming from an Italian-American family where my granddad came over and did the Mosaic work at the Capitol. I've always resonated with this idea of like how different pieces can fit together into a bigger picture. And that's where the whole Mosaic story comes from.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, it's a lot of different experiences. Before I jump into like the next couple of questions, I want to quickly just reping on Invited MBA as kind of a program, you
Yeah.
know, just quickly shouting that out there. They're rolling start enrollments to October. I think it's very flexible as in terms of a program. And it's where Matt It's where uh, you know, people have learned lots of leadership skills and see different contexts of leadership. And so the next question I have is just throughout your experiences and your experiences seeing, training these people both through the Ability program
Yeah.
or maybe even through this initial cohort of Invited MBA, what do you think it takes to manage a team?
It's such an important question, right? Because at the courts, what does it mean to be a manager? I don't know, Roger. You got an answer for me? What does it mean to be a manager?
I don't have a great answer for you, but like that's why you're Luke. That's why you're the interviewee and I'm the interviewer.
That's why I'm the AMA today.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because there's lots of schools of thought on this. If we really break it down, at the end of the day, a manager is somebody who manages, coaches, and leads, right? There's somebody who manages, so they get things done on a daily basis. This is where a lot of the technical tools of management come in: the product road mapping, the project management, the looking at, okay, what are our milestones and where is it going? And then what are our goals, right? What's our quarterly goals? What's our sprint goals if we're running an agile sprint team? What's our annual goals in terms of where we're trying to get to? And so like management at its core is about getting things done and helping deploy resources, whether those are financial in terms of budgetary, whether those are people in terms of the teams you that work for you, or whether those are more technical, like, okay, the resources you have at hand in your company. So you manage to get things done. I think the other pieces are the more ephemeral things that people often think about, which is you also have to coach, right? You have to coach your team. You have to motivate them to be ready for the longer period of time. You have to make sure they have the skills to get things done. You have to make sure that they have the opportunities to develop themselves to get things done. One great thing about tech teams, and the ones that I've run, are often full of autodidacts who love learning and love learning for themselves. And so, your job as a manager is partly to coach them and give them the guidance that'll set them free to learn. And then lastly, as you move up in management, I think it's about leading, right? And leading in so much as setting a vision for the organization, making sure that people are talked to in the language that they care about and that they feel connected to, and then making sure that we're leading to a place that matters, right? Everybody wants to be a part of an organization and part of a team that they feel is doing something that matters. And to do that, you got to manage results, you got to coach to actually prepare for the future, and then you got to lead somewhere. Somewhere that actually does matter. Otherwise, you're just kind of playing around in the muck.
Is that a distinction you want to draw, Luke, like between like a leader and like a manager? I've kind of read some stuff about that, but I'm curious to kind of hear like your take on that. And like a follow-up question to that is just what kind of communication skills do you need as a leader or as a manager or as some kind of hybrid of the two as you're thinking through that form?
It's a great question, and it's going to get to some of the other ones that I think you want to talk about later, which is when technical people move up into these roles,
Yeah.
right? They sound similar, but they do have pretty distinct differences to them. When I think of the manager role and I think of that piece of what you're talking about, it's a lot of detail orientation. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. It's a lot of following up. It's a lot of making sure that you are actually checking the boxes that need to get done, and that you are actually ensuring that things that people, things people say they're going to do are getting done in the right way. This is where things like SMART goals come in, right? Being specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, time bound. This is the tools of management, right? Once you get to leadership and you get to another place, I think it just connects with a different part of your team. This is where you're talking more. Oh, I killed that fly. This is where you're.
That's multitasking. There's communication skills right there. Like if
I don't
you're
know if there's any Buddhists out there. I'm very sorry. I know I'm not supposed to kill flies. Sorry about that. But he surprised me. Sorry. But leadership to me at the end of the day, right? Like this is more about the motivational piece. This is more about painting a picture of something that doesn't exist, that we're not totally sure how we're going to get to, right? Like when we thought about creating the Invited MBA off of our corporate learning programs, we said we wanted to create the best of an MBA in a part-time version. And that's the vision for it. How we actually get to there, what pedagogy we use, what platform we use, what the case studies are, that's the management part of it, right? And so, they're two sides of the same coin, but I think that one without the other, you can't be an effective leader and manager at an organization.
Yeah, no, that I think is a key insight to kind of talk a little bit about that. And I think that distinction gets a little bit deeper because, as you know, Luke, we talk about this. A lot of Springboard students, a lot of Springboard alums,
Yeah.
very technical, and we love the work that they're putting out there, portfolios, design portfolios, data, anything, that's out there, tech sales. So I
Totally.
think there's a lot of technical domain skills. But what do you see are some common blockers for people who kind of are technically skilled? They're doing really well as individual contributors. They want to scale up. They want to take that next step into becoming, a manager or a leader or both, really successful at both.
Absolutely. I think that there's multiple levels of it. Some are mindset oriented, some are tool based, right? And then some are just blind spots that people have. So from the mindset perspective, right? Like I think that there's a big jump that people make when they realize that, they became an engineer because they can learn and they want to learn. And the best engineers are continually learning. Right. And so they're saying, hey, I have 3 engineers on my team who are brilliant. They're autodidacts. 2 of them didn't go to college. One of them got a degree in I forget what his degree is, but he's a self-taught engineer either way. And they're autodidacts and they want to continue learning. I think there's a mindset shift that happens when one of these technical folk decide they want to be a manager, when they realize that the skills of management are similar. Right. There's something that they can learn and something that they can devote themselves to and that are a continual practice, much like being a good technical engineer. Right. And so I think that there's a mindset shift that happens. And, some engineers have been told their whole lives, you're not a people person. You go over there and do that. You do the coding. And I think getting over that mindset of saying, you know what, I could be, and I could manage people and I could lead teams. And it's a set of tools that I can learn is like a really important mindset piece to get over. And so I think that happens. I think, from the management perspective, the other thing that starts to happen is in engineering, there's often a right answer, right? There's like, okay, what was the performance of this code that you put together? What's the performance of this product? How does it fit together? How efficiently does it run? All those things. There's often a right answer. And so there's this frame that we come from when we're technical experts of like, here's the right answer. Let's get to the truth. Let's go. Right. And management can be really fuzzy when you're moving outside of that. You're dealing with some of the softer parts of people, right? You're talking about people who have different motivations for being part of your team. And you have to think about that and worry about that and really touch them where it matters to them in terms of engaging them. You also have to start thinking about the rest of the organization, when you're no longer just worried about your team of engineers and worried about getting the right code base in place. You're also now worried about, okay, how do you connect with sales? How do you make sure marketing hears the right things and so they know where you're going? How do you connect with the executives to make sure that you're making the right strategic decisions? And that's just there's not always a right answer to that. And moving out of a world of black and white to a world of, okay, this is the fuzzy collaboration of an organization can be challenging for technically focused people.
No, for sure. And even though it's challenging, though, there should be a lot of reward, right? Like, I mean, that's why managers are paid the big bucks, or so I've heard. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you heard the same thing, but
I must have missed that one. I must have missed
that
that one.
one. They pay you the medium bucks, or no?
I'm still sitting here wearing a flannel shirt in
Sure.
my bedroom while I'm taking an AMA. So let's not go too crazy. I don't have this beautiful wooden cabinet behind me, Roger.
Yeah,
Maybe
we
one
got the
day.
strengths finders right here. There's
Strength
tons of strengths finders. It's my arcane book library. I have a lot of leather-bound books. I'm a very important man.
It smells of rich mahogany over there. Is that what I'm picking up?
That is what you're picking up. I have no idea about the wood content. Probably mahogany.
I love it. You're picking up something big there, though, that I do want to call out, Roger. You talked about that's why people want to get into the management phase because they want to earn the big bucks or whatever it is. And I know you said that tongue in cheek. I want to call out something, though, that, particularly in the technical fields, being a manager isn't for everybody. And that's totally fine. Right? Like there are people who continue to be individual contributors because they are really skilled at that and they really love that type of problem. And in today's world, particularly at big companies and certainly at small companies as well, there's more space for them to continue doing that individual contributor role when that's right. You're bringing on a totally different set of challenges to be a people manager. And that, if that motivates you and that type of messiness is something you enjoy, great. If not, it's a fair choice to say, I don't want to do that. And I think companies are starting to realize, and they have started to realize over the last 5-10 years, that the only path up shouldn't be management. It should be actually, you can bring your expertise in other ways. And if I kind of put one final point on this, I'm probably talking too much, Roger. I told you this yesterday in the pre-prep. Stop me. But the one final point I would say on this one is I was talking to my engineers earlier today about this whole idea of when do you want to be a manager, when do you not want to be a manager, and just be really conscious and deliberate about that. You know, it's probably one of the disciplines where moving from a technical expert to a manager is the most difference in a job. When you move from a salesperson to a sales manager, you're still doing sales in some way, shape, or form. You're still relating. You're still doing this stuff. When you move from some of these other ones to managers, it has some similarities. In software engineering, it can be very different. Your day can move from being in a code base to being in meetings, right? And depending on size of the organization, size of opportunity, all that stuff, you got to know why you want to do that. And you got to consciously choose it. Don't just let it be the default path for you.
Yeah, I got a +1 on the whole. Like, there's definitely individual tracks when it comes to being like more senior technical contributors, right? Like when you're looking at getting into different tracks. So definitely see that. And of course, like management is not the only way to go up, you know, tongue in cheek. I did say that, but there is something to it though, I think. But I hear you. There's definitely different paths. I mean, for me, just speaking personally, and not like your experience or the experience of like the many students that Abilitie has taught, right? My job has changed from doing marketing things to being on Zoom all the time.
Yeah.
That, there's always a significant change, I think, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I guess like, well, we're now talking it down, but I kind of want to talk it up a little bit. Like where have you seen like management skills? Like, let's not talk about the management role essentially, but like maybe some of the skills involved with it, right? How is that some good examples of either in your career or other places that you've seen that it's really helped accelerate someone's career?
Yeah. It's interesting because I come from environments, and this is where, things can be very different at big companies versus small companies. I come from environments that put a lot of focus on training people into management in some way, shape, or form. The organization I started my career at, McKinsey, is a big management consulting firm, and they pride themselves on creating space for people to become managers, right? And then to become executives, and then to become leaders, right? There's a reason why historically it was called kind of like one of the chemistry labs that create the CEOs of the future. I don't know if that's so true anymore, because now there's other organizations that do it. But it is important to say that, the culture I come from was a place where they really put an emphasis on that. And so that came up in a lot of ways for me. The most important way was it came up through a lot of apprenticeship from really good managers, right? And so I still remember some of the early work that I was doing where I would have managers would sit down with me and give me really detailed feedback on my work. I in one point was building a presentation, and I had a manager who sat down with me, looked at it slide by slide with me, picked up one slide and said, "Hey, Luke, make a footnote on this slide. And then at the bottom, right, this slide sucks and never show it to anybody again. And here's why it sucks, because of this, this, and this." And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I guess that does suck. I could get better at that. But because he was apprenticing me, this was coming from that place, right? And so I had people who were giving me feedback, who were coaching me, who were helping me see the impact of things. I think the second skill-based thing is, when you're becoming a manager, you're starting to learn how to see across disciplines. You're starting to learn how to see across these cross functions. You're starting to see how to bring soft influence skills to teams that are not your own, because you're basically the mouthpiece for your team. And I think a lot of my apprenticeship on that, sadly for people who are in this virtual world, happened in the time right before and right after meetings that I would go to, where I would go with my boss, and they would pull me aside for 5 minutes before the meeting and say, "Hey, Luke, what do you think we want to get out of this meeting?" And I'd say, we want him to say yes to this. I was like, "Okay, great. Well, how do we get there?" Right. And then they would help talk me through it. And then after the meeting, they would sit there and they'd be like, "So what did you observe?" And I'd be like, "Well, I saw this. I missed this. I saw this. I was hoping to see this." And then they'd break it down with me. And when I was starting my career, I'm a tiny bit older than you, Roger. I'm not that old for the record, but I'm a tiny bit older.
Tiny bit. I have a good skincare routine though, so
I'll tell you what. It's maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. But I had people who would do that with me. And so now in this virtual world, I'll tell you that I, as a manager, try to create space for that. And sometimes I forget, and, sometimes I just don't have the time. And so I really appreciate it when the people who work for me say, hey, Luke, can we debrief for 10 minutes after this meeting? Can we brief for 10 minutes before and talk about where we're going? Because I do find that a lot of that stuff is where the skill development happens, right? It's not in the theory of like, oh, here's what a framework looks like in terms of this. It's in the practice of actually doing it. And then from the commitment to the high standards that good manager brings, that says, you know what? I'm here for you. So I can tell you when you fucking sucked, right? And I can tell you when you should have been better. I had a manager before a meeting who goes up to me and she says, Luke, when you go to this meeting, whatever you do, don't fuck it up. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And that might come from the thick skin of being the number 6 play on SportsCenter getting dunked on. But, I think these things are like the practice of management. And I think you can't get away from them at some point.
I mean, yeah. And by the way, on that highlight, I didn't know you were the one getting dunked on. So now I feel
dunked on twice. That's like in 18 years after I got dunked on the first time, I got dunked on a second time by Roger on an AMA on YouTube.
Oh, well, this is slightly less painful, hopefully.
It was pretty painful. I'll tell you what, Roger.
Yeah,
It was fun.
I feel you on that. But okay, well, talking a little bit about that, I think that's interesting that you mentioned, the split between the practice and the theory. And if I think of one thing that's like very, very theory based, right? It's the MBA. Now, I have to admit, I was one of those business undergrads that just like literally swore off MBAs. I went to school. I didn't really focus that much on my studies to the chagrin of my parents. I kind of had like startup things going on, all this kind of stuff. And I was like a quick exit from university. I was a quick exit from the whole idea of doing an MBA and everything like that. I really took like the startup path, if one can call that. So I guess like one thing I've always wondered though is that like, was that the smart choice? Do people need MBAs to get into leadership positions? And if not, why do you think that misconceptions still exist that you need like a degree, a credentialed thing from Harvard? And I mean, again, you're from Harvard, but so, but do you need that? And like, if not, why does that misconception still exist? It's an expensive one too, because people might be putting down hundreds of thousands of dollars for it.
100%. It's a really interesting thing. When you said, that misconception still exists, I was curious about it because I was thinking about it. And I think in some places it does still exist. And in many places, people are getting away from it, thankfully, because it absolutely is not needed to be a good manager. It is absolutely not needed to be a good leader. I mean, I shared the story a little bit earlier that, two of my engineers, two of the smartest people in our whole company who lead my engineering team. They're my senior software engineer and my director of technology. Two of the smartest and best business people I know, and neither of them went to college, much less an MBA, right? They're self-taught, they're doing all that stuff. And so I think, full stop, you don't need an MBA to be a manager and a leader. A lot of people still get it. And a lot of people still get it. It's a heuristic for some things, right? It's a commitment to some things in terms of, okay, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to grow, I'm willing to do this. When we had to think a lot about the MBA when we were building our program, the Invited MBA. And at the end of the day, what we did was we boiled it down to what are the 3 things people get from it? And so why do they do that? Right. And this is different at different places. So I can extrapolate and go a little bit further on it. But at the end of the day, when you're getting an MBA, you're getting conversancy, you're getting connections, and you're getting confidence, right? You're getting conversancy. You're getting conversancy in the language of business. The language of business is finance. The language of business is putting numbers behind things and actually putting together a discounted cash flow. The language of business is understanding what the ROI is of a marketing campaign. The language of business is understanding how organizations function, how organization departments work together. That's the conversancy that you get from an MBA. And people go in there because they don't know how else to get it. And so they say, okay, let me get the conversancy. They're intimidated by finance and they take 2 years to learn finance. Okay. And so now they can build a budget, right? Do you need an MBA for that? Absolutely not. Does it help? And does it give you a core set of skills? There's a reason the first year of Harvard is required curriculum so that everybody has the same conversancy, right? So conversancy is one. The second one is connections, right? And the connections have a huge impact depending on where you go and what you're looking for, right? And depending on where you are in your career. I got tremendous connections going to Harvard Business School. I met people from all over the world, and I feel incredibly blessed that I could, right before the pandemic, go out to Singapore on a work trip and reach out to a friend who I had met there, who was the CFO of the One Fighting Championship, because I'm a mixed martial arts fan, just like I killed that fly.
Oh, I thought you said I thought you would say you were like a mixed martial arts practitioner too.
If only. I don't fight it. I don't fight much, but it was pretty awesome that I could reach out to my friend who I had known back in Cambridge and go see him, and then go see a fight and like go hear about their business and all that. So the connections are like really important. And when you look at maybe the top, I don't know, 10 MBAs, you really do get a network that is extraordinarily powerful, and that really does connect you longer term for many things. And different ones have different places there, but it's really important. And then lastly is this idea of confidence. I think one of the things I got from an MBA was confidence in my career path, which is an educational path and an HR path and now running a product function at an ed tech company path. And as importantly, I met people who were finance people, and I learned to have the confidence to be like, I don't want to do that. Right. And so I think people put all these different things into the MBA, and you can get those from a $200,000 thing, but you can equally get those from the resources that are available to you. Right. You can get this conversancy, you can get these connections, you can get these this confidence, which helps you become a manager, which helps you become a leader of a company, which helps you on your own career path in so many ways. And so when I think about the MBA, and when we think about the MBA, a lot of it's around that.
No, I really like how you broke that down. Sometimes with the MBA, it feels like almost like a mystic kind of thing. But I do think like it's helpful to have. I will say this: the language for sure, the conversancy and just like speaking
Yeah.
that same foundation. But then I think everything else that you mentioned, I think there could be many formats and many ways to get to that desired.
Springboard's one of those, right? Like, I mean, you have this incredible alumni community that you all look out for each other. And if you're if you're an engineer who wants to become a technical leader, I am sure there are people within the Springboard network who have made that step, right? And so those connections are every bit as valuable to you. And I think that that's just important to know.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we've seen stuff like that. Not to like pump our horn too much, even though I'm wearing literally the company's name on my shirt. But there's the alumni community, and we definitely seen. Actually, one interesting place where we've seen this is the mentor community, because we have a lot of mentors that teach these different technical topics. And one of the things that they always say is a joy is they get to actually talk with their peers, but like across different sections, and most of them are kind of leading teams as well. So definitely, yeah, Springboard's a format, Invited MBA is a format, a lot of formats out there.
It's such a good point. And this idea of, I was talking to one of our clients earlier today about the importance as you become a manager of having an informal network of advisors, an informal network of advisors who you can throw things off of, who you can brainstorm things with. You're going to have struggles as a manager, right? One of your best people is going to quit at some point. Someone's going to have to go out and everything's going to get pushed back. You need to have this informal network that you can reach out to, whether they're mentors in terms of people further along in their career, whether they're mentees, people you mentor, or whether they're peers. And, I love this idea of the mentor community in Springboard. It sounds like you guys are doing some pretty cool stuff with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying. I think we're doing it.
How big is the Springboard alumni community at this point?
Oh, I would say in the order of like thousands of people. Yeah.
That's so cool. And you think about this, like how fast it grows.
Yeah.
Harvard is a huge MBA program at this point, 900 people, right?
Right.
And that means it grows 900 people every year. You look at one of these organizations like yours, Springboard, you look at one of the organizations like us at Invited MBA, and we're just growing as a network so much faster. It's just a different pace. And, when you're looking at these connections and you're looking at an individual being intentional about how they craft their community, craft their career, these networks are every bit as valuable.
No, for sure. I think the accessibility of it has definitely helped as well, like on every one of these sides, because there's not that many people. That was kind of one of my hangups too. I can't really at 24 or 23 think about putting down $200,000 or $300,000 for
Totally.
something. Forget the whole SAT score,
Yeah.
GRE, all that stuff too. I took the LSAT. It was very misguided.
With the
It's
LSAT, Roger, you were going to be a law school guy?
gonna be a law school guy. That's where they put all the miscellaneous. There's a hierarchy. It's like doctor, engineer, and if you don't go to science, you got to be a lawyer. So,
That
but
would not have been to your parents' chagrin, I would say. Your parents would have been very proud of you, I would guess, if you were a lawyer. And you told them
yeah,
you
but
YouTube
then
influencer now?
I did startups. But actually, what helped with that, and then I got a question after this. But what helped with that was the whole Jack Ma situation. Well,
Interesting.
before he whatever happened there. But but
Yeah, maybe we'll save that for a drink after the AMA.
no, we'll
What
say that for
actually
after the
happened
AMA.
with Jack
Yeah,
Ma?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that helped actually like redefine entrepreneur for like a certain generation, I think. So that
Yeah.
was kind of interesting. Before they were like, what is he doing? What is he doing with his life? So that kind of was
You
there.
didn't
But
tell them about being a Clubhouse influencer? They didn't pick up that piece?
actually, I think they were. I can't just have that on public record, though. I don't. I don't think. I
Hey,
never.
Roger, if you're going to talk to me about my number 6 Sports Center play, we're talking Clubhouse
All
influencing
right.
right now. And actually, to be honest, I know Clubhouse has fallen off. I think it's a fascinating case study, right? And it's fascinating for exactly what you and I were just talking about. One of the phrases that always sticks in my head, particularly in today's world, is came from Andela, which is a company, really fascinating company that trains software engineers in Nigeria and then sets them up with different. I probably shouldn't talk about them here on Springboard, but it's a cool company.
No, it's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, they're really
They had a phrase that was, opportunity is not equally distributed, but
yeah.
talent is. And I think it's a fantastic phrase because particularly in today's world, I'm 37, right?
Yeah.
I know some things. Some of the best ideas, some of the newest thinking, some of the coolest things are happening in parts of the world I've never been to and with people who are 10, 15 years younger than me. You look at the creation of something like Gather Town, which to my money is one of the best things happening in the metaverse, a 2D version of it, like really cool things, solving proximity-based video chat, solving the way of giving agency to people in terms of engaging in a way that they can't on Zoom. Like freaking love it. And that was started by these 2 Facebook software engineers, right, who were studying this and going into it and are now, I don't know, mid-20s, right? And they've raised $100 million and they're doing great stuff. So like, I think the way connections are going to happen, it so requires these communities that you and I have been talking about and those communities showing up in ways that are more distributed than, hey, you spent 2 years in the hallowed halls of Cambridge or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, kind of building on that a little bit, I think like one question I have, and this comes up a lot with our alumni, our
Yeah.
students, is everybody's looking to get a job,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so I know this video's phrase is like how to go from entry level job to manager. I think there's some people who might just even be like, how do I get to an entry level job, right?
Mm.
So I wonder a little bit how, your lens as a manager, as someone who's trained leaders and managers, how does that throw into how you see hiring, right? Like, what do you look for? What is it like to build a great team, and like, what are the kind of like hiring parameters you're seeking out? And I think that could lend a lot of perspective to people who are looking to get hired, and of course,
Totally.
obviously, people who are always looking to hire.
I love that. And it's so important, right? Like getting the job is the most important thing. So you have a place to practice these skills. I think this is a place where it's quite different in big companies versus small companies, right? And I've spent time at both. McKinsey was about 30,000. My current company is 22. Okay. So like very different size companies. At the big companies, a lot of it quite honestly comes down to checking the boxes that they've put in front of you, right? It comes down to doing the learning, doing your research, doing the prep that's going to let you show up right in those interviews and let you check those boxes, because they have extraordinarily rigorous standards and they have extraordinarily regimented ways of hiring. If they say you're going to need to know React, you need to know React, and you better be able to solve a problem in it when you're actually going there, right? If they say, hey, we're going to do this type of case study to you, you damn well better practice on that case study, because that's exactly what they're going to do. And one thing that I think is great that big companies are doing now more is they're being more transparent about what those processes are, right? I think there's a big push against bias in the hiring world, which is great, right? the hiring world historically has huge mini-me biases, has huge affinity group biases, has huge biases on all these different fronts. And a lot of the big companies are making big pushes to have transparent processes. So fucking do the work, right? And if you can measure up to their standard, they will hire you. I promise you, right? Right now, big tech is in a little bit of a hiring freeze, and so that's happening. But they're coming back, right? Like, this is the way the world is going. For big companies, do your research. The information is out there, and if you want that, go after it. Okay. For small companies, I think it's slightly different because it's so. You're asking people to do so much more, right? So when we hired our third engineer last year, we hired a guy who I had known and who had worked on a team of mine 10 years ago. He'd worked on a team of mine when he was still an intern in college, and he was doing totally different than programming stuff. He was doing program management stuff in terms of helping us put on events. He was doing operational things in terms of making sure that the client work that we did was regimented and worked well. He then left me, which, if he's listening to this, Ruben, I see that, I see you. You left me. It still hurts my feelings. I like to think I just didn't want to be too. But he then left. He went to a startup. He ran operations for a while. He went to Facebook, and he worked on a couple of different teams at Facebook, managing teams. A year ago, he decided, or a year and change ago, he decided that he didn't want that operational program management, that type of path. And so he said, I am going to learn coding. He put himself through a coding boot camp. I kept in touch with him every couple of years since then, trying to hire him for anything I could find him for, because he was one of the best people I'd ever worked with. And so when he said he was doing this, we said, okay, we can create space to apprentice you as a software engineer, but you're going to have to bring your product management skills, and you're going to have to bring your sales skills, and you're going to have to bring your coordination skills, and you're going to have to up our level on all these fronts. And so one of the ironies of our team right now, when you look at him, he's our most junior engineer, and he's doing more and more things as he learns more and more, but he takes on some other things for us. He takes on some of the management. He integrated us into a Notion board for actually how we manage our product roadmap. He put us in place in terms of how we answer and triage different things that are coming. And so when you look at a small company, it becomes less about where you are and more about slope and more about what else you bring to the table. And a lot of that comes down to, the people who are willing to take a chance on you.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I obviously can't speak to like the breadth of experience that you have with all these different experiences. I think that the one quick thing I'll say is I got rejected by BCG. Very sad. But
You did too.
What? You did too? Oh,
I didn't even get an interview with them. They never interviewed me.
They missed out. They missed out. But I will say this. Like, the Springboard interview process, I can't even talk about it. No, I'm kidding. But I was number 6 or number 7, and I definitely think it was a lot more about like, hey, like how willing you are to like just, there's just so much going on, and you need to be in the trenches, and there's just, we can't afford to have anybody who can't bring their like whole self. So definitely see a lot of at least my little anecdotal experience in what you just conveyed.
How long have you been at Springboard?
I have been at Springboard on and off for 7 to 8 years. It sounds like a strange answer. I kind of like weave in and out.
Yeah.
I describe myself, I guess this is public to the world, but like I describe myself internally as kind of an entrepreneur in residence. Because I've definitely started a startup while working for Springboard on contract.
Huh. Do you consider yourself a manager?
I do manage. So I do consider myself a manager. I think it's harder to put myself in the frame of the leader frame all the time. In my current role with Springboard, I would say I have to be both. But it's varied. Like in some roles, I've been more, how would I put this? Like I've been more like called upon to be an individual contributor, or like a stronger individual contributor in certain functions. And some, it's a lot more of the embodiment, the manager leader position. But the only constant is like it's unexpected, or not it's unexpected, or it's like there's a lot going on and there's a lot of needs that need to be filled in. But before this threatens to become an interview of me, I want to ask.
Your parents called me ahead of time and they said, could you please ask him some questions about what his career is and where his career is going? Because we've been trying to figure it out, and we know that Alibaba's already been created. So what's he going to do?
But that's not a me problem. That's like an every kid to their parents. I mean, look at like all the careers that we have now, right? Like half of these careers, could you describe them to your parents accurately?
Well, here's the mind fuck. Like, think about 30 years, next year, maybe you'll have kids, maybe I'll have kids, who knows, right? But like, think about in 30 years, what are the jobs our kids are going to be describing to us? Like, what is that going to look like? It's going to be like, I don't know, furniture designer in the metaverse. Like, I don't know. There's going to be all kinds of different things to it.
I think my kid's gonna live in a pod. But that's gonna like derail this conversation further. So I do wanna. How do I even link this together? All right.
This is
So
why you're the pro, Roger. This is why you're the pro.
I'm not. Well, I just try to link things together. I'm trying to theme things together. So we've been talking about our kids living in pods. You
Yeah.
know, Jack Ma, whatever happened there, all of this. And what I want to ask you is, what resources are there out there for people who are looking to become stronger leaders or managers, including myself? I'm actually kind of interested in anything that you have to contribute on this.
I like it. Well, if you're worried about this whole idea that you're going through in terms of us living in a simulation, which we almost certainly do, there's a new book out called Reality Plus, which I highly recommend. And then I recommend all of the books of science fiction that really push forward that thinking. Interesting work going on in the philosophy sense. Moving more seriously into like some of the places, I asked my engineers this question because a lot of them have moved into managerial roles. And one of the first thing he told me is like, Luke, I don't know if you can say this, but one of the things I learned great management from is Star Trek. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, think about this, because this, as Star Trek connected with me first as a person, he said. And then secondly, they're continually going through this challenge of how to stay alive and how to go toward this broader mission. And, I'm partial to the next generation. Some people like the other ones, right? Some people even like this new Picard one. It's too new for me. I'm old school. But, I think you can learn the point behind the point is that I think you can learn a lot of management from interesting places, and you don't need to just look at business books. The problem with business books at the end of the day is that historically they have one idea that's just kind of interesting, and then they get resonance with that idea, and then eventually have to write a book that's 300 pages long explaining how that 3-page idea manifests in tons of different places. Now, what are good books then because of that? I think there are some books that push the conversation forward and help me as a manager in terms of tool-based things. Things like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni is really interesting. It gets down to team dynamics and what really does break down when a team breaks down. Things like Scaling Up, which gets through how hard it is to move from a $1 million company to a $10 million company, and then a $10 million company to a $50 million company. What are the cadences of management? What are the heartbeats of management? What are the ways you actually can go into and actually build a company that has the right heartbeat? I think good stuff is there. I think tomes like Crucial Conversations resonate for a lot of reasons, right? Because they have tools for how we should approach our mindsets as we go into managerial discussions, ways we should approach the long term with our team, and then actually look to go up the ladder of inference to find common ground as we're building things. And I think tools like that, the Crucial Conversations, really break down some of the core mindsets and ways of having the skills of being a manager. So I'm partial to those. I'm also partial to Work Rules from Google. I think they did a lot of interesting data-based research in terms of what good managers look like, how they actually behave, how they actually do the things that we ephemerally talked about at the beginning, leading, coaching, and managing, how they actually made those things work. And so I'm partial to that book as well. And so, when I look at those, it's a combination of more tactical and more kind of like aspirational things. Something like Star Trek would be more aspirational. Something like Give and Take from Adam Grant, I think, is actually a really good book for getting into the right mindset of realizing that even as you're getting things done, helping people at the core is what management is all about. And that's how you actually long-term get more things done. And so, this is kind of a smorgasbord of different things that I've given you, but there's some technical ones like scaling up, crucial conversations, five dysfunctions of a team, some aspirational ones that certainly have shaped me and shaped how I think about leadership, management, and my role in a company.
Any podcasts? Anything that like I don't have to like sit down and you're asking too much of people.
That's a good question. I'm not a huge podcast guy. What's a podcast that you're on these days?
Oh, like that has nothing to do with leadership or management. I listen a lot to like chess podcasts, but don't look at me.
What's your take on the Sicilian Opening?
I love the Sicilians. Very dynamic opening. One of the most dynamic out there. I think I'm more of a D4 player, but
okay. I had chess club last night, so I was seriously asking that question. Last night we had a chess club meeting all about how sacrifices can lead to better things, and so we looked at all kinds of different. I love chess podcasts as well.
Perpetual chess. So that's the one I'm always listening to. I love the interviews. I don't know about leadership management, but I do think one of the things I've inferred from that podcast is because it's all like chess players who talk about like their experiences and just like there's so much pressure on like how they think and perform. So that's the one. But I have to say I don't actually listen to anything that is leadership or management oriented, which is funny because I've talked with a lot of people whose podcasts are just that. I have a little bit more of a mix. So Luke, please add to it. I mean, I'm listening to like French podcasts out here.
If you think about this, the one that I would call out, and personally, I don't think I'm the biggest fan of the guy. I think he's a little bit self-aggrandizing. I don't know him, but he seems that way. Is Tim Ferriss. I think he does some interesting things with the tools of Titans. And I think I really respect his approach to really understanding not just the abstract, how some of these leaders think, but actually like, what does your morning look like? Like literally when you wake up, what do you do? Right? Because I think oftentimes that gets lost in the more high level things. The current thinker that everybody loves on this one is the guy who wrote the book about habits. I'm blanking on Atomic Habits, exactly. And this idea of getting 1% better every day. And he actually has a good he sends out a newsletter on a regular basis. It says, okay, here's 3 thoughts to go into. And I do very much respect his approach to habits. And, there's a saying in management, which is like, we don't rise to the level of our willpower. We fall to the level of our systems in terms of our own discipline. And, as a manager, having the right discipline tools. That's another thing that my engineer taught me. One of my engineers taught me this. He says that to us all the time. And I think it's true. As a manager, you're responsible for putting in place systems that set people free. And those systems are practice systems, are routine systems, are all these different things. And you got to be thoughtful about that.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Roger, I see somebody typed in, last time I tried to describe my job to my parents, they said, so you design choice trees? That's ops in a nutshell. I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I told you, I think that's a dilemma for like all people everywhere. Well, so we're approaching the end, Luke, much as I'd like to hold you hostage for 18 hours. But I think I have a couple more questions. If there's anyone in the chat who has any questions, I think we have one that's coming in right now.
This one, is your company fully remote, or are people seeing each other personally at least 1 to 2 days weekly? And what's it like managing a team fully online versus in person? Do you want to go first? Is Springboard fully remote?
Springboard is not, because I am physically present in our mahogany office. But typically we are more like remotely distributed. I'll defer a lot to Luke on this. But I will say that I've seen both, right? I've seen like the in-person, I've seen the remote, I've seen the online. I think like probably the main difference I've observed between the two is kind of like what you mentioned, Luke, earlier on.
Yeah.
Like some of it of just, and I think that's why a lot of people advocate for returning to office and things like
Yeah.
that sometime. I mean, I know that's like a very contentious issue these days, but the idea is like it's in those small interactions that are not planned. Because Zoom is really good for like structured, like, okay, I'm entering this day. And what's
Yep.
really funny about the way you work virtually is Zoom kind of squishes it all into a box.
Hmm.
So you're like, hey, I'm like joining here, but you have to be like summoned into each meeting, and then each meeting has
Totally.
to have an agenda and all that, right? Which is not like how a normal work day kind of proceeds in person, because like there's always like a little bit more of that winding adventure. And I think
Mhm.
that's like the part that you miss a
Yep.
little bit. And so I'm just back in the office, and just like who's in the office, we start having some banter. And even this conversation,
Totally.
banter unlocks new paths and new pathways and new people, new directions and everything like that. So I think that's probably the main difference I've seen. But Luke, really curious to hear your thoughts here.
Absolutely. I love that description, by the way. That's a really, really good description there. In terms of what the serendipity is that people are looking for when they're looking to come back into the office. So
Yeah.
I'll break it down a couple of ways. One is, I think one of the challenges that a lot of companies are having is lack of clear guidance about what's going to happen and where the company's going to go, which leads to a disparate set of systems that aren't really set up for either, right? We have in-person systems that are kind of jerry-rigged into trying to do things virtually. We have virtual systems where we're like, but if you want to come into the office, you can try this and go do this. And then you're sitting in an office next to somebody on a Zoom with them. And you're like, what the hell is going on? Now nobody's really working. And
Yeah.
so one thing that I really am so grateful for with my company, and again, we're smaller, we're only 22 people. We have a couple hundred independent contractors who work with us and work in our orbit and do a lot of stuff with our clients. But we're a relatively small core team, is that we made the decision pretty immediately in COVID to say we are fully remote. We are fully remote and we're going to stay fully remote. It's not a decision that we're revisiting. It just is. So right now, our executive team is in Austin, Boston, Germany, and Colorado. I'm in Colorado. And it's been great because then our systems can support that and we can make investments in systems that support that. And that's where some of our learnings about virtual have really come in. So I've said this a couple of times that I want to call it out again. We use something called GatherTown, which is this 2D metaverse, looks really goofy, right? It's these avatars, and some of the people listening to this indubitably played Pokemon back in the day, and it looks a
I did.
lot like that. If you're my age, you played Zelda, Legend of Zelda, and you remember the 2D thing going around. But there's these little avatars that go around, and it's shocking how much it changes the interaction from a workplace perspective than being in Zooms. Like you said, right? Like Zoom, you're put in this box and you have no agency at the end of the day. If there's 5 people in a Zoom meeting, you can't turn to the person next to you and start talking to them while the meeting continues on, like you would in real life. You can't grab them in the hallway outside. You can't do this type of thing. This to me is the promise actually of the metaverse. And this is why we use Gather. It's that it's always on. And so I can actually see who else is in there. I can actually go move myself to go talk to individuals. I can grab somebody from a meeting and say, let's step out for 1 second and talk in the hallway. Similar to how we did in the banter place that you're talking about and that you're saying is so powerful in person. And so a lot of our systems are actually optimized around doing that type of thing, which makes virtual really quite good for us. And so then when we do get together as a company twice a year, literally the only focus isn't business oriented. The focus is around just connecting as individuals and connecting as people, because that's still what's the Mark Twain quote? It's the difference between a lightning bug and a lightning bolt, right? And so like meeting people in person is just well above and beyond anything else. But getting things done on a business perspective and creating space for
Right.
banter and serendipity, I think can and does happen in the virtual world, and that's how we do it. I can get into some of the tactics of how we provide visibility using things like Notion and Monday. I can get into some of the ways that we actually share asynchronous communication in different ways. But I do think the hardest part is the decision, and then the rest is logistics. And once you're doing those logistics, there's really great tools out there and a great culture for it.
No, yeah, that's fair. And I find myself, I mean, it's weird because like I mentioned, we're kind of distributed, and then we all have an office. And then when we're in the office, I actually try not to talk about work as often.
Mm,
And because I think it really is about like that in-person time is about like the connective, fiber almost of the team. So I'm gonna throw out a little bit of a curveball here and just ask you now, based on this context that you gave, which I think was a really great breakdown, and I'm looking forward to like looking into Gather more or stuff in the
You
metaverse.
should come visit us, Roger. I'll show you around our office. I'll introduce you to our engineers.
There you go. There you go. Just build the mahogany walls, and then we'll talk. But
You don't know what our walls are made of right now. They might be mahogany. Nice.
there, well, they could be virtual mahogany. I don't
We've
know.
got a lot of chickens running around our place too. And we have go-karts that people can ride. So I'm not going to brag, but we've got some good stuff going on.
All right, all right, all right. The go kart sold me. I'll get in there. I'll get in there. But so I think what are three great qualities you think people managers have? And just to throw that curveball on based on what we were talking about, what like do you think like there's some that like transcend like digital and then like in person interactions? Is it slightly different? So love to hear your take.
I, it's quite a curveball. You know, I played basketball, not baseball. You can't throw curveballs at me. It sounds incredibly trite and cliche, but great people managers are caring, right? Like at their core, they are caring. They actually do want what's best for their people and want what's best for their company. And, they're always in this push and pull of like, what is it that their people most want to do and where they most want to go? And what does their company need them to do? And that's what management is, right? Like sometimes you got to say, we have to do this. Like, it's not going to be fun. And we're going to do the data migration on Friday night at 8 p.m. because that's the only time when our clients aren't using this. And that's what has to happen. And so like, I think a good people manager at the first is certainly caring. They care about their people and they care about how that actually manifests itself on a day-to-day basis. I think the second one I would say is, they have high standards, right? They have standards of quality and they have standards of quality that they expect, and I think that in having that high standards, they actually raise the level of the team and they set goals for the team. And then they celebrate those goals for the team, right? It's really hard to work and live in an environment where there's no standards and there's no expectation of what quality is. And so I think great people managers are the ones who actually set standards as well. And in doing so, that they motivate. In doing so, they provide psychological comfort. In doing so, they actually do a lot more that helps make a company run. So this caring piece, this setting high standards piece. And then the last one, I think it's always important, and I guess you could argue it's nested under the other ones, but I want to call it out as separate because I think it's particularly important in a virtual world. To your question, they're curious. They're really curious. I think in a virtual world, you're getting so many less signals than you are in an in-person world. You go to a meeting and somebody looks like they're not enjoying the meeting. You, as a manager, can make 1,000 assumptions. You can say, this person's disengaged. This is crap. Like they didn't show up for work on time today. And, they were 5 minutes late for this meeting and now they're not even engaging. What the fuck, man? Like that's crap. This is no good. You can make assumptions like, oh, they're pissed at me. They don't like how I'm doing this management. You know what? I'm going to show them. Let's go do this. Right. You can say, you know what? Maybe they're having a bad day. Like maybe something happened at home and they didn't get on the road and they got cut off and they got the horn blown on them. And, if you want a mindset from where this comes from, the David Foster Wallace graduation speech is one of the most amazing speeches you ever hear. If you have 20 minutes, go check it out. But I think it really does get to good managers as well, which is they're curious and they don't assume they know what's going on in these places. They come at situations from a place of honest curiosity and honestly wanting to care for the people and wanting to raise the standards of the company. And I think that requires humility. That requires putting your ego aside. That requires a lot of different things that I personally think are incredibly important for managers, particularly in a virtual world.
No, yeah. And I see the bar being even higher in a virtual context. It's just like to your point, right? I think it's like a lot easier. It's a lot easier to stitch together like emotional connectivity when you're in person, right? There's so much that gets lost,
Yeah.
even if it's like online. So just even being able to stitch that together becomes even more needed. So we had a question come in
Yeah.
Luke, I don't know if you've seen this. I feel like people don't realize the importance of emotional management until they enter the workplace. As a manager, how do you evaluate when to give your direct report space or feedback?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And yeah, the speech that I think this she's calling out after that, "This is water," is the Kenyon College commencement speech. It's the David Foster Wallace one. Everyone, bar none, should check it out. It's incredible. I love it. Yeah, this idea of emotional management and evaluate when to give your direct report space or feedback. It's a really important one, and I'll give you a few tips and tricks on it. One is, when you're giving coaching on anything, it really helps to ask if the person is in a place where they can hear it. Right. And, I think that can be as simple as, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something. I want to give you some feedback. Is now a good time? Do we have 10 minutes to discuss this?" And be honestly open to them saying, "You know what, now's not a good time. I'm trying to get something done." Right. I'm trying to get to somewhere else, and saying, "You know what, is now a good time? Or should we set up time at the end of the week and talk about it then?" So I think that's one. I think another piece is, this is where you as a manager really do set up systems that either set you up for success or don't set you up for success. If the only time you're ever giving feedback is when something went wrong, then anytime you ask somebody, "Hey, can I give you feedback?" they're going to shrivel up and they're going to be like, "Oh shit, they're going to tell me I did something wrong." So you as a manager creating a cadence where you say, "You know what, after these big meetings, let's get together and let's talk about how it went. This could have gone better." Right? This could have gone, "This is what I observed. This is the impact I observed. And this is what I would suggest in the future. Let's talk about that." So I think that, there's also this place of setting up a cadence to where, you're doing it on a regular basis and you're giving both positive and negative. And there's tons of research out there about how important the positive stuff is as well. I can talk on this for a long time. Do you mind if I talk a little bit longer on this, Roger?
Do it. This is
Okay.
all space for you.
Okay, cool. So asking for, is there space for this to actually have this communication, have this feedback session? Two is actually creating a cadence of it, which is just so very importantly. Three is, when you're doing feedback, also connecting it to larger things and a larger commitment you have to that person, right? So the commitment you have to that person might be, "You know what? Roger, you told me you wanted to be a manager in the next 12 months. Us talking here, me giving you this feedback is about us continuing the path to get you there. And that is why I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this because I want you to be your best self and I want you to reach the goals that you and I have jointly set over the next 12 months. And this is a process for getting there." And so connecting it to that makes it not just feedback of like, "You did this wrong." It makes it coaching and growth of like, let's make sure we continue on this path. And that becomes really, really important for the long-term connection between you and the person who works for you in this case. And so, these types of high commitment, these types of creating space for coaching, these types of actually being specific about your feedback and having a cadence of it are really important. I'll share one other story just to go with this curiosity thing, because I think this idea of emotional space, curiosity, and this one I learned from one of my friends who was in the Air Force, and he was a flight pilot trainer. And he would say that whenever they did a training flight, they would all come together in the debriefing room. And first of all, they would all take off whatever, I forget what we call it, bars or stripes. I'm not in the Air Force, so I don't know this stuff, right. But take off your rank, right? And leave your rank at the door. And we're all there looking at it. And then when we're looking at these things, they actually had a process they went through dissecting things. And they would say, when they were actually looking at what happened, they would put the pilot up there, and they would go through the process of saying, "Okay, what did you observe? How did you decide? And then what did you execute?" Right? And that level of discipline in terms of a tool to use actually made the feedback so much better, because, you can imagine a pilot doing the wrong maneuver at a situation and having 1,000 different ways of coming at it. Maybe they observed something different. Maybe in the cockpit, they didn't see the other situation happening out there. Maybe they did see it, but they made a decision, and they made the decision for a reason that, us in the room weren't making. And we need to understand why they made that decision. Or maybe they did see the right things and they did make the right decision, And now they executed and they just screwed up on the execution. You look at those three things, your feedback should be totally different for all three of those things. On one, you're teaching them how to see. You're teaching them how to observe. You're making sure they have their head on a swivel. On another, you're teaching them how to decide. And you're talking about what are the value judgments you're making? How is that going to become better in the future? And a third one, you're saying, okay, let's make sure you have the tactical skills to do this. And, it was an example that always stuck with me because it got to this level of coaching and coming at coaching with curiosity to really understand the experience of that other person. And so that you actually can be helpful to them, not just say, you screwed that up, do that better. And I think that's where the final piece of curiosity goes in my head.
No, I think that's a great answer. Luke, you're fired up. You're still ready to go. So we got one more question coming in for you. And it's going from individual contributor to manager often means going from operator to strategist. How can you help yourself get noticed for a strategist position if that isn't your everyday?
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. At small companies like ours, I think a lot of it comes down to just starting to do the work before you have the job, right? When you look at a tech team like ours, which is pushing out a new product this year, and we have a whole 6-month product roadmap for doing it. And one of the things that I'm so appreciative of, and I actually renamed my engineering team, product team, a year ago because I wanted them to know that they're responsible not just for the code, but they're responsible for managing it. Is taking on more of the job that needs to get done because nobody's doing it. What does that mean? That means communicating outward, actively reaching out to stakeholders and setting up time with them to get their feedback and get their buy-in, taking ownership of not doing the communication plan for the change management, but ensuring that somebody is doing it, ensuring that it fits with our plan for the product rollout. Doing the management on a day-to-day basis to provide visibility to data and metrics about how things are going, and then proactively communicating when it's 2 weeks behind, right? Like I think in many of these, when you're going from an individual contributor to a manager, this idea of becoming a strategist at small companies, just do it. Start doing the job before you have it, right? And that doesn't mean don't keep doing your job because you need to do your job. But a lot of people become managers because they do the job before they have it. At large companies, it becomes a lot of apprenticeship. It becomes a lot of looking for opportunities. And this is where the idea of having a mentor is really important to help identify what those opportunities might be. This is where the idea of having a sponsor, which is different than a mentor, but someone who creates those opportunities for you and looks out for you, becomes in. And I think in big companies, you have to be strategic and thoughtful about how you create space for those.
No, that's awesome, Luke. I think, I resonate a lot with that as well. I think especially for small companies, I've never been employed by like a particularly big company, so I can't really speak about. I mean, Springboard now we're a little bit bigger, but no, for sure. I think there's a lot of I forget what it's called, but there's like actually like a specific. There's like different forms of governance, and there's a form of governance where it's like you get the power or responsibility based on what you've done.
Interesting.
So it's not a meritocracy. It's like something. It's like basically based on like what you've done, kind of a little bit.
And
Right?
is this like holacracy, like they used to do at Zappos and all that stuff?
I don't really know what happened with that in particular. So maybe, but like I think something like that. But the basic premise of definitely in smaller organizations, I think there is a lot of room to be able to kind of define your own destiny. And so that's why I've kind of always chosen to be in smaller organizations.
You're a mover and a shaker, Roger. You're a mover and a shaker.
Influencer, mini influencer, micro influencer.
Micro influencer. I love it. I love it.
That's what they call us these days. But yeah, Luke, well, thanks so much for sharing so much of your wisdom, answering different questions. I know there's been like a lot thrown at you, and you seem like you can go for another like 3-4 hours, but I gotta go for dinner.
Was last night, so I'm free tonight. So you just tell me what you think.
I mean, yeah, maybe after I get some, I gotta get some, like Gatorade and some carbs in me and everything if we have to keep on going. But
maybe next time we should just play a chess game, just verbally. So I'll be like pawn to d4, and then we'll see what you come back with.
Pawn to e4, I would do pawn to e5, but that's all good. We could just do like
Capture,
a classic.
capture, pawn to e5. I'll take it.
But no, well, it's like chess boxing, which I feel like we've engaged in a form of. Have you seen that sport? It's actually
I
really.
would I would love chess boxing.
It's
You got to ask yourself, you know what? I'm going to give you a question to end, Roger, because I know you give all the questions. But here's my question, and you don't have to answer it right now. But
okay.
here's the one that I want you to answer on some podcasts. What are you the most standard deviations above average at?
I can give you that answer easy right now. I can't. This is what the answer I'd give on a podcast.
Okay.
I've written this before. My only superpower is like my incredible ability to read PDFs and like actually read them without like
PDF.
PDFs. Man, the world is in PDFs. I write for like all these different outlets, and really all I do is I take these like 80-page PDFs and like translate them into like human language. But like so much of the world and the details are just like within that. I just have an inhuman tolerance for like reading through these like super thick. I read through this 80-page briefing on like it was in Mandarin about like China's Bitcoin laws. So like I mean, it's just there's that's my answer. So that's and
Roger,
I'm
you
not
should have been a lawyer.
well, yes and no. I think the thing is like I wouldn't want it to have been directed by like money. Like I just like my PDF reading is like I just like whimsy through all these different PDFs. So that's the thing I'm a standard deviation above. I won't say like understanding the PDFs, but
Yeah.
I'll say like having an inhuman amount of like tolerance to just read through like these
How many
like
languages do you speak?
well or or I speak English, French, and Mandarin fluently. Speak a little bit of Spanish, Portuguese, a little bit.
Roger, you started by asking me about my Mosaic career, but it appears to me like you are a Mosaic man yourself.
That's why it resonated. That's why I was like, we got to get Luke on this show, which is just me and you, two brain cells, just talking to one another right in the void.
A lot of synapse between us, I'll tell you what, but we're doing our best.
That's how we do. That's how we do. But all right, Luke. Any parting thoughts, or should we just conclude?
No, just appreciating Springboard. When I met Gautam back in San Diego a couple of months ago when we were sitting on that panel together, I was just impressed with how you all think about things, how you all are going about this stuff, how y'all are, even pivoting and having new things and new offerings for your people and for organizations as well. So I am a huge fan of you all, and here at Abilitie and at Invited MBA, we're huge fans of you all as well. You've also just inspired somebody in the chat to pick up Duolingo and pick up a new language. So Roger, perhaps it's your night of inspiring people. Way to go. But really appreciate the work that you're doing. Really appreciate all that stuff. We would welcome anybody who wants to learn more of the business skills, wants to learn more of that conversancy, connections, and confidence that I talked about. We would love if any of your folk come by. We find that folks with a tech background who are starting to think about becoming people managers really resonate with a lot of the stuff we do, because it really is realizing it's the same learning you do as an engineer to become a people manager. It's the same way you're stitching together all these different things and just improving every day. I feel lucky that I have an incredible engineering team full of autodidacts who teach me things every day. And, I think you're creating a community that's similar to that at Springboard. So just thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this. And we hope to continue working together.
No, for sure, Luke. And mutually, likewise, huge fan of the invited MBA concept. Huge fan of what Abilitie's doing. Maybe you'll see Roger.Huang +1, sign up,
There's a spot for you whenever you want it. And we'll even let you create your own desk in the metaverse.
Oh, nice.
Maybe of
Gotta be
mahogany.
Gotta be
Mahogany.
that's the clutch. That's the clutch wood right there. But yeah, no. Well, Luke, happy to have so much wisdom from you. I think this is now the time where we just disappear. I don't know how the internet ends things, but we'll just part.
We go through platform 9 3/4 and disapparate away.
There we go. All right. And on that note, take us away. All right, cool.